Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris Mooneyham, and welcome to the TCA All Sports Report. As always, brought to you by Fox 5 Atlanta, 680 The Fan, and of course, the Touchdown Club of Atlanta. This is our final show of the 2014-2015 season, and what an absolutely incredible, dynamic, parody-driven, yet also driven by dynasties type year it has been. Really, and that's been another of the one of the main storylines that we've seen throughout the GHSA athletic calendar since we started things back in August. We had a great balance, as we have over the last few years, a great balance of dynastic type teams across all genders, both genders, all classifications, all sports. Yet at the same time, we've still had our share of great surprise teams that have made runs either to the championship, deep in the tournament, or winning a championship. It's really been just an amazing, amazing year. And of course, as our population continues to grow, we continue to open up new schools. We're going to continue to see these same storylines unfold. So this is our year-end review program, our year-end review broadcast. Of course, not your typical four-segmented show, as you may have grown accustomed to. Just one large segment where we'll talk about some of the great storylines that have unfolded over the last year in the state of Georgia. Of course, we'll start on the gridiron, as we so often do. Colquitt finally climbs the mountain and wins that state championship that's eluded them over the last few years. So many consecutive years of reaching the state semifinals. And finally, Moultrie gets that second state championship in its program history for the first time since 1994. How about Buford winning its seventh state championship in the last 8 years? Really, a lot of talk now starting to permeate. We all know it's one of the great dynasties in the history of Georgia high school athletics, but I think the question now becomes, is it the greatest? And just how far up that list are they if they're not number one? Mount Perrin wins the state championship in the 1A private classification and surprises some folks, winning a state championship in Cobb County, but that leads into one of the other big storylines of 2014. Yet again, a Cobb County school system high school does not win a state football championship. Never has a Cobb County high school football team ever won a state championship. The Cobb County school system. I know that may throw some of you to hear that, but remember, Mount Perrin was a private school. Back in 1967 when Marietta won it, they're a city school. Still, no Cobb County high school system football team has ever won a state championship. It's absolutely the darndest thing. Speaking of Mount Perrin, who did they meet in the championship game? Well, one of the great storylines, regardless of sport, in 2014-15, Eagles Landing Christian Academy. The Chargers started their football season at 0-6, then won 7 consecutive ball games on their way to the state championship game. If A.J. Gray had played every quarter of every ball game this year, he would have arguably had the greatest season any football player has ever had in this state. Of course, Washington County was just so good this year, they needed him to only play 3 quarters in, I think, 6 of the 10 regular season ball games, maybe 7 of the regular season ball games. He played so few fourth quarters this year, it was absolutely insane. And there were times this year where he actually didn't even play the second half completely. If this kid had played every quarter of every regular season game this year, I'm not kidding you, A.J. Gray, and this is not broadcaster hyperbole, this is not me going off the deep end here, this kid would have turned in 5,000 plus yards of offense, a combination of passing and rushing. He would have scored probably 50 touchdowns, north of 50. He may have had 15 interceptions and 80 tackles. It would have been one of the great seasons in Georgia high school football history. Instead, he just settles for the AJC All-Classification Player of the Year award. We had 10 instances, at least this year, where football players had individual top 15 single game performances of all time. At least 10, where a guy cracked the top 15 in passing single game, rushing single game, or receiving single game. On to basketball now, and the entire season can be encapsulated into one statement. Half of the 14 state championship games down in Macon this year were decided late in the fourth quarter. Some of the big storylines: Jonesboro wins a close ball game late, wins their second consecutive state championship. The Cardinals, of course, feature a couple of really good senior and junior players, but of course they also feature maybe the top sophomore in all of America, M.J. Walker, a kid who will probably be the number one player in this state in 2 years. And they're the two-time defending state champions now. I was on the play-by-play of the broadcast for one of the great comebacks that we've seen over the last few years. So fortunate to be down at Columbus State when Rutland put together an incredible rally. At the 4-minute mark in the state semifinals, they trailed Jenkins by 14 points. By the time we reached the 1-minute mark, that's right, just 3 minutes later, Rutland had taken the lead. And Jenkins would gather themselves, reclaim the lead, win that semifinal ball game, and a couple of days later would go on to win the state championship for the city of Savannah. I'd also be remiss if I did not mention the end of a career for arguably the greatest girls basketball player in this state's history. Asia Durr's career came to an end this year. For 3 years, she was one of the top players in America and maybe the top player in this state. And her career ends over at St. Pius. Now she's on to Purdue. On the baseball diamond, this entire season has been about pitching. Yes, there are some amazing offensive numbers out there. I just covered a Kings Ridge series where they had 4 guys that were hitting above 460. Absolutely unbelievable. But it's really all been about pitching this year. We had 6 no-hitters at least in the first month of the season. That's where I kind of lost count. 6 no-hitters in the first month, and I'm pretty sure there were more. And the tournament was very much the same. Consider the Gwinnett teams that won championships, perhaps the 3 best teams in the state this year: Wesleyan, Parkview, and Buford. Well, Parkview's Ryan Inman, in his 5 starts during the tournament, had 3 shutout complete games. Wesleyan won 10 straight in the tournament, dealt 6 shutouts, and outscored their opponents 90-11, while Buford dealt 6 shutouts in their 10 wins as well. To the pitch now, where the Dalton Catamounts are laying claim to being one of the great dynasties in our state's soccer history. They have now pushed their mark to 60-plus matches unbeaten. 60-plus, just 1 tie over the last 3 years. And they're a 3-time defending state champion now, having beaten Allatoona down in Macon a few weeks ago 4-0. St. Pius and GAC, well, while they were down in Macon, all they did was pull the double dip. Both their boys and girls won the state championship. How about Kelly Barnhill with one of the great individual performances of 2014-15? She helped the Lady Greyhounds win the 6A softball state championship. She goes out, strikes out double digits, throws a complete game, no hitter. We now move to boys track and field, and another great individual performance belonged to Banneker's Ryan Clark. Ryan set state and all classification records in winning the 100 and 200 meter races. And he helped his 4x400 relay team also win that state championship and set a state record. The ultimate individual performance of 2014-15, however, well, that belonged to Candace Hill from Rockdale County. Many of you know the story. Last year as a freshman, she came out, burst onto the scene, grabbed national attention by winning the 100 meter and 200 meter as a freshman in the highest classification. Now, as if that wasn't enough as a freshman in one of the talent-rich states in the entire country in track and field, she also broke state records in doing so. So everyone wondered, my goodness, what is she going to do here in 2015? Well, all she did was go out and do it again. And when I say do it again, I mean she did all of it again. She won both races and set records in both of those races. How about lacrosse? We've only had 6 state championship seasons of classified, organized lacrosse. And in all 6 of the highest classification seasons, the Lady Eagles of Milton have won those titles. They won another one again this year. And one of the great dynasties, we were talking about dynasties a little bit earlier, and of course I just mentioned Milton. One of the great dynasties, regardless of gender or sport or classification in the history of this state, the Lady Raiders of Walton tennis team. They just won their 11th state championship in the last 13 years. Okay, so we look forward in the schedule to next season's academic, or rather athletic calendar. Volleyball, softball, and cross country all can begin practice on August 1st. Now, volleyball can begin play on August 4th. Softball can start playing on August 8th. And the earliest we can have a cross country meet is August 11th. And yes, I know what you're wondering. Georgia high school football starts on August 21st. So that's going to be it. That's going to be it for the 2014-15 TCA All Sports Report. Another amazing season. A lot of names, a lot of people that we'd like to thank. I personally would like to, here in the broadcasting business, as far as the high school broadcast circles, we all kind of depend on each other because it's so hard to get information sometimes from the outreaches of our great expansive state. I want to make sure I thank all the sports writers across the state, and I mean everybody across the state, because I do a lot of research. I like to joke that for every broadcast I have, I waste 25% of my research I never use. So here's a big thanks out to everybody at the AJC, all the beat writers there, Autry and Purdom and Holloway, S.T. Coleman, of course Todd Holcomb and Chip Say, all the guys over at the Gwinnett Daily Post, Freelander, all those guys, from the MDJ, the Marietta Daily Journal, Bednarowski, and all those guys, and of course from all the people at the neighbor newspapers. I get a lot of information from you guys, and I thank you so much for all your hard work. Everybody over at 680 The Fan, Scott McFarland, Doug Conkle, Carl Worrell, Chad Potier, Steve West, Chip Yagi. It was a pleasure working with you this year, gentlemen. From the NFHS Network, Scott Janovitz, Justin Hanover, Matt Day, my broadcast partners this year. And of course, Stephen Lawler, my executive producer. I want to make sure I thank Amy Walker as well. No person has ever made me sound just so good. Thank you, Amy. And of course, I want to thank Mark Brock from DeKalb County Schools, who had a large input in my statistical base this year when I was covering the DeKalb County Schools. Everybody at the Georgia Junior Bowl, Joe Burns and Jim Pete, thanks so much, guys. And of course, DJ Shockley and Rusty Mansell, my broadcast partners. Everybody at the GHSA, Alan Sharp, Executive Director Gary Phillips, and his son, by the way, who helped us out in a pinch down in Macon when we were missing rosters. And, of course, I want to thank Brad Walsh, who put together the Ever Wonder portion of our program every week and provided us with some of the lost history of not just the Touchdown Club of Atlanta, but Metro Atlanta and the state of Georgia. And finally, I'd like to thank Chip Emerson. Chip, my producer and director for the TCA All Sports Report, my friend, thank you so much for everything you've done over the last 2 years. So until August, when we come out with our football preview, that's music to your ears, isn't it? Until next year, I'm Chris Mooneyham for the TCA All Sports Report.